This episode is sponsored by Team Builder, yet another company that's doing great things for the first responder community. As a strength and conditioning coach myself who also trains tactical athletes, dissemination of wellness information is one of the biggest challenges. Now, Team Builder is the premier strength and conditioning software for tactical athletes, and there are several features that really impress me. Firstly, there is a full exercise library, so you, the personal trainer, does not have to create that within your own department. Secondly, you can send out programming, but also individualize, which I love. So you blanket program for everyone. Now you can tweak based on someone's injury, someone's need to maybe drop some body composition, rather than having to write a program for every single person on their own. Team Builder also allows you to build custom questionnaires to collate health and wellness data. It integrates with wearables. And I think one of the most important things is obviously it tracks. To me, it's imperative that we as a profession start tracking our people from day one and then over the full span of their career, therefore catching potential wellness issues and injuries before they happen. Now, if you want to try Team Builder, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a free 14-day trial to experience all of the features. And if you want to take a deeper dive into Team Builder, listen to episode 1032 with Melissa Mercado, or go to teambuilder.com. And I'll spell that to you because it's not as you'd think, TEAMBUILDR.com. This episode is brought to you by Thorne, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorne is now offering you an ongoing 35% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorne is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their multivitamin Elite, their whey protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorne.com, THORNE.com. Click on sign in and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorne. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorne, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show former UF football player and founder of TMAC Fitness, Todd McCullough. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his journey into collegiate sports, his transition into the business world, personal training, his integration of yoga, training tactical athletes, faith, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,000 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So that being said, I introduce to you Todd McCullough. Enjoy. Well, Todd, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thanks for having me, James. I look forward to it, man.
So where on planet Earth are we finding you this afternoon?
We are in Santa Barbara. Just finished a little trail run with the pup. Had a little overpriced breakfast here in Montecito, and yeah, man. So enjoying. Just super blessed to be here. Love this part of the country, and then obviously our brothers and sisters are hurting right now. A couple hours south down there in the Palisades, Malibu area. So weird. We were just talking about before we recorded. It's a weird time to be here. Whereas you and I are enjoying this great conversation, and a couple hours south, like our firefighters, brothers and sisters, are down there dealing with hell. So,
well, you have an actual California news network that you're watching. What are you hearing as far as the impact and how close they are to actually having it under control?
Honestly, I don't watch the news. I don't have a news update. I touch base. I found that over the years that's just been so sensationalized and over the top. But I think this is probably one of those situations where it actually is as bad as people hear. I just check in with my people that are down there. And unfortunately, I've got friends that have lost everything, their homes where their kids go to school. Sometimes, husband with kids, sometimes, a husband, wife, first house, gone. So I've just been checking in, seeing how we can help with, my online platform on the mental wellness and movement side, but just checking in, just loving on people. I try to ignore the news. I have like a little app that I keep up where the local fires are. It seems like we're pretty safe right now up in Santa Barbara, but you never know with these winds. I mean, these Santa Ana winds pick up and there's not much they can do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of Santa Barbara, one of the guys that became a good friend I've had on the show several times is Eric Goodman, who's the creator of Foundation Training. He was
I read
based
his
there for a
book.
while.
It's great.
Did you ever cross paths with him?
I haven't crossed. Isn't Eric in Hawaii or something now, or someone said?
Yeah, he was Santa Barbara, then Hawaii, and now he's actually put his roots back in Florida. So he's even got a studio now that he's working out.
Oh, nice.
On the coast.
Where in Florida is he?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's south of Daytona, around that area, I believe.
Okay.
Like Melrose, around there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always just trying to student and learn from other folks. And I haven't met Eric in person, but I got his book, Foundation Training, I believe it's called.
Yes.
And a lot of his poses, I have a, L5, S1 issue in my low back, and it's been very helpful. It seems that he's done a brilliant job of merging. Like, it seems like he took a few foundations from yoga, which is where I have a background in, and applied that to his stuff. And I heard he was talking in the book one time about how chair pose, right? How he's learning to breathe through his upper back and expand his diaphragm, and how he picked up that in yoga and has been able to apply that to helping people with their low backs. And yeah, he's done an amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, it works. It saved my career, hands down.
Did it really?
Yeah, I ended up becoming an instructor, which I don't really teach apart from the class that I do at the local gym here. I kind of put it into that hour. But yeah, I mean, I was hurt my back. When you're a firefighter, the first thing they throw at you is surgery and pills. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So went down a path of PT, paid for a chiropractor. And it was through the chiro that I found the video of him doing on YouTube. Started doing that. And my recovery went from, like 5% to a 45%. It was just amazing. And then after that, when I got back to work, getting stronger and stronger, getting back to fixing why you got hurt in the first place. So I can't talk highly enough about it.
Yeah, we'll incorporate that some of my clients when we do some training with low back stuff. I like a little bit of his work. I've been, some things over the years. You always try to piece together new stuff. I like the knees over toes guys, a little bit of his stuff.
Ben Patrick, yeah.
Far as strengthening kind of the tibia and those type of muscles to help protect the knee. Both of those guys have done a really good job, and it's been cool to learn online from those people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I interviewed Ben. I went down he's in Clearwater, Florida. So I went to his studio. He put me through a session, and then we did an interview there in his studio. So another super, super effective system, 100%. So you mentioned Florida. Let's start with your origin story. So tell me where you were born, and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Yeah, so raised in rural North Florida, little place called Baker County. So it's right there on the Florida-Georgia line. If you were to go up 95 to Jacksonville, go west, kind of right between the middle of nowhere, between Lake City and Jacksonville. It's a little town called McClellan. And so that's kind of where I'm from, and pretty confident that I'm the only one doing yoga when I'm back home. But kind of grew up in that culture where it was either you get really good at hunting and fishing or football. And my dad and them did more hunting and fishing, and I loved football. And so kind of dedicated the first half of my life, James, to football, and was fortunate. You kind of know the culture there in Florida at UF, and was fortunate to play football at the University of Florida and get a scholarship. And that was, kind of a dream come true from a kid growing up in that area. And with the blessings of that came 5 surgeries and a couple of knees, couple of shoulders, and some back injuries and neck injuries that I never got fixed. And just found myself after playing football at Florida, just hurting in pain. I'd wake up in the morning at 5 to go to the gym, and, you're typically your cleans, your snatches, your squats, your bench press, and I would just hurt by 11 a.m. But being an athlete, like I needed that dopamine rush in the morning to kind of get my day going, and was kind of lost. There was a girl I dated for like 5 years, thought I'd probably get married. She played volleyball, I played football, and that ended up having a bad breakups, not somewhat similar stories to you in your first marriage. And it was just kind of lost, hurting and lost. And then a guy I played football with at Florida was in Ventura. At the time I was working in finance at Merrill Lynch. So I think this was interesting, right? On the surface level, you never know what people are going through, right? Because on the surface, I'm a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch. I'm making good money. I'm a young, I'm 15 years younger than all the other brokers, high net worth private clients. And ultimately I was just kind of hurting inside. And a buddy I played football with at Florida was from Ventura. And he was like, dude, come visit out here. I think you'd like it. Came out and visited, and I was like, well, this is sure as hell different in North Florida, but anything's better than right now. So I had Merrill Lynch transfer me out to LA. The market crashed as soon as I got there. All those young brokers got laid off, and had a chance to go back to Florida with like another financial firm, and decided that I wasn't quite ready for that. So I took all my suits to Goodwill and started handing out flyers for personal training. And it's always joke say I'm probably the only personal trainer I know of the Series 7. So that was probably 14 years ago now.
So going all the way back to your parents, I know you have a first responder in your family. So talk to me about what your dad did.
Yeah, so my dad did undercover work there in North Florida. He worked kind of with they're in Stark, Florida, and he did a lot of stuff with the DEA, a lot of undercover stuff. So the way I always described it was, if you ever watched that movie Training Day with Denzel Washington,
mm-hmm.
It's funny, as a kid, you don't know how crazy that was, but that's just kind of our everyday life. Was Pops drove a, kind of a low rider profile gold rims truck, bald head, Fu Manchu, had a gun on the hip, a gun on the ankle, and another one in a black bag that every time we went to a restaurant or something, the black bag was there with the Glock in it. And it was just wild, some of the stuff and the stories that we grew up with that were just everyday life for us. It wasn't until I became an older man that I realized that some of it was a little crazy. And then I think a little crazy probably runs in our family. So my brother now does similar work. He's with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in the gang unit. So they deal with the worst of the worst in the city of Jacksonville and the gangs, which I think this year they had the lowest. They've got an amazing sheriff there in TK Waters. They've been really preventive on the crime. So I think they've cut down their murder rate in Jacksonville now almost in half of what it was before. And I think that my brother and them and his colleagues with the gang unit have just been doing an amazing job. So yeah, we've got a lot of police officers in our families, my uncles, a lot of our close friends. We barbecue on the weekends, firefighters. My mom's a teacher. So kind of grew up with that blue collar type service family.
As a child, what was the impact of your dad's profession on your upbringing? And the reason I asked that, for example, being a firefighter, we're gone for 24 hours every third day.
Yeah. So I think one of the couple lessons, my dad, what he intentionally was teaching, I think he was intentionally, was that fear was not tolerated, right? And I think some of his tactics probably were maybe a little frowned upon, particularly nowadays, but fear was not something that was tolerated. Meaning, like, for example, like as a young child, I can remember there was like a big bully in the school that failed a couple grades, and he was picking on people in school. And my dad pulled me aside when he got home and was like, if you don't kick this kid's ass tomorrow morning, I'm going to beat your ass. And I'm like, Dad, the guy's bigger, he's older, he's stronger. He's like, he may beat your ass, but I promise you, when you get home, you don't have a chance against me. So I suggest you at least fight against him. Go to school the next day. The kid's picking on people at the school ground. And then I beat the shit out of the kid at school. And the principal calls me and was like, hey, Mr. McCullough, your son said that you told him to fight a kid at school. And I was like, yeah, good job. Way to go, son. Let's go. Just like little lessons like that as a kid helped me so much in football, right? Like where it's like you're playing football in the SEC, you're going against the biggest and baddest people athletically in the country. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. How do you wear them down? All right. And what you find is that most people don't like getting hit in the face, no matter how big they are. And so I think my dad, doing the dangerous job he did, raising me and my brother where fear was not an option. And that if you've been given God-given gifts of strength, it's your job to protect those who are the most vulnerable, women, children, those type of things. And so I think that's, again, probably my brother ended up being a cop. Why, football was something that came naturally to me was you're using these gifts to help people. And that's just part of our upbringing, him being a police officer. I think that was, I think a lot of his tactics may have been a little rough, a lot worse than what I just mentioned. But I think that those things are helpful for young men in modern society.
I listened to you on Do the Hard Things First podcast, and you mentioned the host has been going through some struggles with these fires himself. Mm-hmm. You just made a comment, and this was obviously a few years ago that you did this recording, but you said that your dad had some struggles in his upbringing. And I think now we're really starting to understand that there's a kind of multi-generational element, whether it's trauma, whether it's creating resilience. When you reflect now with this 25 lens, what kind of environment did your dad grow up in that made him a good police officer, but maybe, like you said, some of this roughness as well?
And this is really kind of what excites me now about where my work's taken me is I just went down to the city of Jacksonville and did a kind of a movement and the mental wellness presentation to all their new police academy people, and just getting them to understand that wellness is not just how many push-ups you can do. It's also your emotional wellness. And go back to my father. So my father grew up really poor. I mean, dirt poor, like lived, they shit in an outhouse, didn't have, plumbing. They bathed in the river. And so if you see pictures of my dad and his siblings growing up, they've got like funguses and stuff on their face in middle school, or they were literally bathing in the river. And his dad, I didn't find this out till later, he grew up in a very violent home. Loved my granddad, but I watched my granddad beat down my grandma. And I'll never forget that memory. My dad saw that. That was a normal Tuesday for my dad. My grandma, took a gun to my granddaddy in the house, shooting at him. Right? Like this was his everyday upbringing. And since they grew up so poor, my granddad used to take my dad, I found this again out later, to the neighborhood and make him fight all the bigger, older guys, even if he got his ass kicked. Just because there's a culture that people don't quite understand that I've noticed here on the West Coast, people are really good intentions about helping people that are lower income in tough areas, is that pride, when you have no money, pride is everything. And so if you have pride, you have something to hold your head up to. And so my dad was raised in a culture where fighting just took place. It didn't matter if you won or lost. It was just, you were not going to back down if your last name was McCullough. And my dad, you were talking about the trauma of childhood and just upbringings. He instilled that in me and my brother, I think with good intentions, but I think there was obviously some demons that he still to this day has to battle, right? So like, you come home from work as a police officer or a firefighter, let's just say you're in finance, you've had a stressful day, and you need a 6-pack or a couple glasses of whiskey to take the edge off. How does that affect your relationship with your child? How does that affect your relationship with your wife? And so my work has been, I've been super blessed to have so many great teachers, is merging what I knew as an athlete with yoga and helping people, put together tangible ways to decompress before they come home at work, to get their mind right, so to speak, before they go to work, and not bring that shit home with you. So great question though, but it's something I think that hopefully first responders are starting to at least ask is, what does wellness look like outside of the gym?
100%. Yeah. It's interesting with that punctuation of the shift. I just came across a technology about just over a year ago now called Nucalm, Nucalm. Mm-hmm. And it's, I'll give you the quick kind of cliff notes. formulated by one of the smartest people that we've ever had in the US. He figured out the frequency that the brain would be at during stress, flow, all these different phases, and then figured out another 10 plus years to figure out, well, can you make the brain go into that stress state? And yes, you can, obviously, with breath work and yoga.
Yep.
But what he found is that through you're listening to music, but beneath the music are these undulations, and it's not like something you can find on a Spotify playlist. Each track is like a gig's worth of memory, and it's passive. So this is what makes it so beautiful. And they've had people like monks that have used this and said that made the meditation even better. So it's an adjunct to this as well, but it's passive. So if you have got that monkey mind and you're first entering, the kind of what would be a meditation journey, it's going to bring you down whether you like it or not. And so they have one called Power Nap, which is 20 minutes. And to me, if you haven't got a diligent, practice where you can, like you said, already go to the gym and wind down, another option is to find somewhere safe, go back in the bunk room or, in your police car within the pound, the safe environment, put on a sleep mask, put the headphones on, and just take 20 minutes. And it down regulates, and it gives you what feels like about 90 minutes worth of sleep as well. Absolutely incredible. So you were like your dad, undercover, slinging dope at 5 a.m. When you walk through the door at 9 a.m., now you can be dad.
Yeah. Be sure and share that with me. I'm always fascinated to see what technologies and different things are out there. I think one of the things that we always have, I try to build it into what's tangible, right? So a few things that have helped our community is we always say, get your mind right first thing in the morning, which is move your body and do our meditation, right? And so we make these 20-minute home workouts. So it eliminates the excuse, I don't have time, right? And then the mind right meditation, we basically, since you just worked out on the mat, hey, while you're here, let's do a little stretching, a little breathing. And it's a very simple meditation they do. It's a moment of gratitude, right? Got a chance to move my body, got a roof over my head, just powerfully starting your day with gratitude. 2, lifting up a loved one. I've got this little kid and this family. I want to make sure they're safe today. My wife, just pouring blessings upon them. Maybe you have a friend going through a tough time right now, just lost their home in a fire. 3, visualizing success. Something I learned as an athlete, like seeing a great day happen, step into that moment. And then 4, being present, being still, listen to the rise and the fall of the breath, the sounds around you, which is inspired by Psalms 46:10 in the Bible. It says, be still and know that I am God. And I think in today's modern society, more so than even fitness, I think the thing that we all struggle with is being still, right? It's creating those moments of stillness. Instead, we look at our phone on Instagram every time we get bored, we take it to the bathroom. And so I think that's one thing that we found to be helpful. Another technique you may find interesting, James, is something I've learned recently over the years. I call it like a soul check-in. And so we'll have the police officers and people in our community, just like you said, before they're making that shift after work, or maybe it's on their lunch break before they go home and see their kids, is simply placing one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, sitting in your car, taking a couple of deep breaths, inhales and exhales, just really slow for a couple minutes, and then just asking simple 2 questions. What do I need right now? Maybe it's a hug, maybe it's some validation, whatever it may be. And then what do you need to let go of, which is typically the most powerful thing. I need to let go of the crap I saw today at work. I need to let go of my shitty attitude. And just having that down regulation, as you said, before you walk in your home and you have your 6-year-old kid there who just wants to play with his dad, right? How do you bring that best? And so we always to me, those are 2 ways we've found we have a little bit of success is the first thing in the morning, getting your mind right. And then what we call like a soul check-in before you walk back into the house.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, going back to when you were a child then, walk me through your journey into football. And then what was it that you started seeing within yourself that made you an elite athlete at that sport?
Yeah. So I think that, growing up, again, it was either hunting and fishing or football. And, we grew up just I grew up on people talking about diet now and stuff. I grew up on a Mountain Dew and a Pop-Tart with butter. That was my breakfast. But we were outside chasing dogs, hunting all the time, or shooting squirrels or rabbits or playing football. We were just outside all day, come in for a ham and cheese sandwich at lunch and maybe a glass of sweet tea, and then back out till dark. And so I think that rural upbringing got me naturally fit and strong. And then I was fortunate. I had this opportunity to go to this prep school in Jacksonville called Bowles, which is about an hour away. And it's where all these elite athletes from around the world, these countries would send their elite athletes to go train at Bowles. And I had an opportunity to go play football there under a legendary football coach. So I left home at 15 with a very clear intention of I was going to play D1 football, and lived on campus my freshman year and just kind of dedicated my life to that, and was just super blessed. My parents, again, my dad was a teacher, my mom was a cop. They sacrificed all. I mean, I lived on campus for 1 year, but during the summers when I was 15, didn't have a car, they would drive me an hour each way to go work out at 6 a.m. before they go to work. I mean, who does that nowadays, right? Like, drive your kid an hour just for the kid to go possibly have this crazy dream of playing college football. So lots of gratitude, very just fortunate being in the right place at the right time, having access to some coaches and trainers that really helped. And then I got lucky. I ended up being 6'5", right? Like my best bud growing up was probably just as good of a high school football player as I was, maybe even better, but he was 5'10", right? Like, I happened to be 6'5". There's nothing I could do to, that just happened to be the luck of the lottery on that one.
When did you have that final growth spurt? What age?
So I think I was a tall string bean at like 15. I was probably like 6'3" at 15. And then even though I was as skinny as I was, like, I was pretty strong. So like, we grew up in that program where it was, you were there to go to college, right? So like, I can remember being, I don't know, I guess sophomore, junior in high school and benching like 335. So, this was back in a day where we didn't have, all these sports programs for young kids. I was just kind of country strong and grew up in that world. And so I was, a tall, athletic kid with probably too much anger and run around and hit people. And I got fortunate to leverage that in the best way possible, I guess. But I was good enough to start at Florida, which was great, but I was never physically dominant. I couldn't dominate. Like, I was an All-American in high school, but I was nowhere near an All-American in college. Good enough to start in SEC, but I played with some dudes there that were just physically way more gifted than I was.
So you're obviously on this football track. In the back of your mind, was there also any other career aspirations, or were you thinking about pro football at that time?
No, my dream was, if you grew up in North Florida, it's not even about pro sports, it's college sports. That's the culture there. It's college football on Saturday, Jesus on Sunday. Like, that's that environment. You're either a Georgia Bulldog, a Florida Gator, or a Florida State Seminole. We don't think too kindly of those down in the South Florida, down in Miami for the Hurricanes. That's a different breed. But no, it was just playing college football. And it was probably short-sighted not to have aspirations more for the NFL. But after 5 surgeries, I was so beat up, James. It was just like, I was happy. I mean, I was lucky to still start and play, but I went there running a 4.71 and left running a 5 flat. And you're not playing in the NFL at a 5 flat.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is an interesting topic. Coaches, athletes. I had such an unusual perspective when I came to the States, and I've told this story many times, but it's important to kind of set up the question. When I was here for a bit, I started hearing the same kind of Uncle Rico story from all these kind of deconditioned, late 20s, early 30s dudes. I coulda, shoulda, woulda if it wasn't for my ACL, my, insert injury here. And then, it wasn't immediately, but as time went on, I'm like, what are they doing to their young people? Because I'm used to, certainly in the generation I grew up in, I'm used to none of us really getting to a high level of athleticism in school unless you're an incredible rugby player or football player, especially. Yep. The rest of us play, but then you leave school and then you keep playing. There's a lot of adult leagues, pub leagues, local leagues, all the way through to 50, 60 years old in some places. Wow. But I didn't see that in America. I saw a much higher level of performance in our youth, and then a steep drop-off when it came to wellness of the general population after. So what is your perspective, having literally been through this crucible and carrying the injuries of your collegiate sports, that line between performance and winning, but also acknowledging the longevity and wellness of the youth athlete?
That's an interesting distinction you saw from the UK versus here. I haven't thought much about that on that side. I would just say there's 2 things, and I would say that you're balancing 2 things, right? One, I was very clear I wanted to play Division I football. And I think if you have a young boy or girl that has a dream, you foster that. That being said, at that time period, yoga wasn't even on the radar. Like I could have played a lot longer if I would have known what I know now about yoga, right? So one of the things I'm so passionate about young kids and even professional athletes incorporating at least 1 to 2 days of yoga into the routine. Um, Everything was just squat, deadlift, clean from the ground, right? Like most elite athletes now, they're not going anything from the ground. It's mainly hang cleans, right? So again, I told you I was 6'3" as a 15-year-old, tight hip flexors. I'm doing cleans and snatches. And, I ended up having an L5S1 fracture, right? Just because I didn't have the form to properly lift like I was. That said, like it takes a lot of commitment to play at that level. And so I think that these kids that want to do that should do that. I think the couple things I would think, if I had a child now, people ask, like, would you let him play football? The first thing I would put a boy and girl into is jiu-jitsu. I think that makes the most sense as far as a practical thing for a boy or a girl to learn tactical situations. Because once you're done playing football, you're done. Like that skill set's not very transferable other than the lessons you learn of working with people, which I think is a big lesson. But actually, I think jiu-jitsu would be something I would put a kid in. And I don't like the specialization of kids too soon. Kid needs to play multiple sports up until college, learn different movement patterns. A lot of these parents now are wanting to make their kid the best 14-year-old youth soccer, baseball, you name it, and they're not developing them to a better human being. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm super passionate about is like, I think one thing we've lost in society is, do we really have a Sabbath, right? Like if you're not modeling a true Sabbath for your child, how are they ever going to learn that? So like taking, whether it's one day a week, whether it's Sunday or whatever it is, as a family where you're off the phones, you're off social media, you're off playing sports, you're not working, you're actually just resting and enjoying your time with each other. I think that's another thing that's interesting now in today's world, because I see it now with these youth sports where these parents, and they're doing it for the love of their child, I think, at least will acknowledge whether or not some other things underlying that is that they go these 3 hours for these soccer tournaments or baseball tournaments, softball, and the parents are both working full time. They're tired. They're stressed. They're up at 5 a.m., driving 3 hours, come back home, go back on Sunday. There's no time to rest. And we need rest as a society to refuel. And I think that's one of the things that's lost in modern society. I think just intentionally having a Sabbath is something that I'm consciously working on myself as a business owner.
I love that. That's such
I don't
a
know if that makes any sense or not, because it's like my default is to keep working. I could work on TMAC Fitness, my business, every day. I love what I do, but intentionally having a Sabbath, I think, sets the kid up for being a better human and not just an athlete. Because let's just say you get the luck of the draw and the kid's the 1% of the 1% and he goes to play professional sports. The majority of them end up broke and depressed, divorced, just mental issues, because they were never developed as a complete human. They were just taught how to play a sport and they don't know who their identity is. And so I think that's something that parents have to be conscious of.
It's so interesting. I watched the Weight of Gold, that documentary that they did on the mental health of some of our most elite athletes, including Michael Phelps. And there was so many parallels between that and our military first responders and our identity crisis, especially if we get hurt or we retire, because it's very easy to just say you're a firefighter. It's a kind of a cool thing to say. A lot of people think, oh, wow, that's amazing. But then one day you're not, and you realize that that's not who you were. It's what you did. And it's something you're proud of having done, but there was always going to be an end point. And so whether it's an athlete who's trained and then they finally made it on that podium in the Olympics, and now they've aged out and they're like, now what? Since I was 3, I've been swimming, now what am I going to do? Or since I was 18, I've been a firefighter. Now what am I going to do? So I think, whether you're talking about children or even, our adults, that I love that idea of the Sabbath and certainly, really kind of taking that time to step back and reinforce the fact that it's what you do, it's not who you are. And I love that term student athlete. If you are in college, if you are in high school, student comes first, athlete is second. Now you might be a diligent athlete, but you're not just an athlete, you're a student athlete, you're a rounded person.
James, how your transition in life and your journeys, how have you found identity outside of what you do for a living?
Let me tell you, there is no greater fall from grace when it comes to the ego to being, I used to be a firefighter paramedic and now I'm a podcaster. I
Yeah.
mean, to my, born in 1974 ears, it sounds so fucking ridiculous, but it's what I do. So
Yeah.
there was a struggle. I volunteered for a heartbeat locally, didn't like it because I wasn't part of
Yeah.
that team. I wasn't allowed to
Mhm.
do X, Y, and Z as a volunteer. And so I look back and go, yeah, that was from good intentions, but it was also me kind of not letting go of that uniform. But after that, realizing, I think the big takeaway is this: you're just doing exactly what you're doing now. You played football, you got to that level of athleticism, you got these injuries, you found your way to recover. Now you're using that knowledge to help 20,000 people. When you realize that after you've done X, Y, and Z, that now you can become a force multiplier, and
Yep.
that the mission was never to be a firefighter, the mission was to help people,
Yep.
to save their lives, to stop them hurting. That
Yep.
mission hasn't changed. Now I just do it from a microphone and through books. So once you can reframe that your life's purpose really hasn't changed, it's just the costume that's changed, then I think it makes it more palatable.
No, I love that. I always go back to some of John Wooden's stuff. I think he's one of the greatest teachers. He's known as the legendary basketball coach at UCLA, but he always referred to himself as a teacher. Like whether he's teaching right now, you're teaching through a podcast, right? It's not necessarily working necessarily as a fighting fires, just through a podcast. And I think that understanding being of service, one of the things that's been interesting to me that I've learned over the years that's helped me is that, I have this online business and I've been super blessed and fortunate with it. And I did training in LA for 10 years, like seeing 9 clients a day and running around. And, all you wish was to have this online business so you don't have to drive around in 2-hour traffic in Beverly Hills every day. And then you get that and you're super grateful. And then I realized I was kind of down a little bit, that I forgot what it was like to put my hands on people and to teach. And so twice a week, I go to my local yoga studio, make it doesn't make any sense financially how much time and effort I put into the class, the playlist, but I get to teach in person. And it reminds me why I got into this. And you see people moving and listening to music and meditating. And for me, that's been super helpful. It's like I can't do it more than probably twice a week, time commitment wise, but just being intentional and taking time to serve in a capacity reminds me of kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. If that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense because I do it too.
Do
I
you?
teach a free class for first
There you,
responders, military dispatchers every
there you
Monday at
go.
Iron Legion, the gym that I train at. And
There you go.
it just, because I've never been a full-time coach, but I did it kind of weekend warrior coaching. And so it just same thing. It keeps me fit because I do a lot of like sleds and sandbags in that class, the tactical
Yep.
athlete stuff. But then it keeps me, one foot in the door. So I am reminded, am I doing well? Am I evolving as the strength and conditioning world is? Am I falling behind?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. And then, like you said, it's just giving a little bit of yourself. And in that particular example, anyone locally that's in any of those fields, they can come and train for free for an hour. So, but like
That's
you, that's all I can do is 1 hour because I got too much
yeah.
else.
Yeah, it humbles me. I guess I kind of learned years ago. There was a girl in LA, and this is when I was training people all day. And a friend of mine was a physician, reached out to me and was like, "Hey, this girl just lost her leg, and she was this beautiful model and got this horrible disease and infection, and she lost her leg. And like, we can't afford, she can't pay you to train, but is there anything you can do to help her?" And I was like, I was selfish at first. I was like, I'm giving up a couple $100 an hour to come do this for free. Like, what is this? And it ended up being such a beautiful experience of watching her journey of training and just the grit she had to get back. Now I see her, she's in magazines again without her leg and stuff and giving hope to thousands of women around the world. But I look back at my time in LA and I think that's one of the best things I did. I didn't make any money at it, but I look back at it, I'm like, that was time well spent. Like you
Yeah,
gave, God gave you some gifts. You had some great teachers and you actually used it in service of your fellow brothers and sisters. And so I'm always reminded of that lesson. It's easier for me to be all about me. Like it's easy for me to be just selfish. And so taking some time like you do 1 hour a week, right? You can give 1 hour a week of service.
100%. Yeah, it's what I'm trying to tell the fire service at the moment. We're so I mean, a lot of them are just so tired they can't even critically think. I mean, they're literally just worked into the ground. But we're also so brainwashed on the fallacy that we have this amazing schedule. And if you look at a firefighter schedule, it's not. It's a 56-hour work week. But also, when you see union negotiations, they're chasing a pay raise every single time. And I'm trying to get them to reframe, like, the most important currency is time with your family, not dollars and cents.
Yep.
And when you can get away from that carrot on the stick and start really fighting for what matters, because the LA firefighters are being heralded as heroes. I guarantee you 3 weeks from now, no one will be talking about them when they are saying, hey, we're understaffed and we need support and we need funding and we need to change the work week because our firefighters are dying of suicide and cancer. It's going to be on deaf ears again. So getting people to understand what's most important so they start fighting for it themselves. Dollars and cents rarely is the priority.
Yeah, it's such a heroic thing to watch right now. These just people that are, not thought about as much in society with the firefighters, and watch right now. Literally, these people are saving lives, and they're the people that run into a fire. And I find that, James, just fascinating because I don't think the average human does that. I don't think the average human wants to run into a fire. The natural instincts to run away. And I watch these brave men and women do this, and it's just, they're a critical part of our foundation of our society and our local communities. And I hope that this lesson reminds us, but our default is we'll forget about it in 3 or 4 weeks, and then the damage will be done. Like, can we show up for these men and women to help them and their families outside of this, right? Because right now they're not with their families, right? They're not at their little kids' baseball game, right? Like, can we really be of service past this disaster right now? I hope we can.
Yeah. I shared a video, I think it was about 3 or 4 days ago, of I think he was LA County or LA City. Anyway, he was out there fighting the fires and his home was burnt down. And so his crew were helping him sift through the ashes to find his wedding ring, which he's probably in trouble for not wearing from his wife. I got that vibe. But they found it. It was amazing. I mean, it was all kind of, burned out, but they found the ring and he put it back on. But just think about that, because we've had this too. When we have hurricanes here, we go to the stations and protect strangers and leave our family to deal with the hurricane on their own. So it's the families that pay the price too. So we've got to really kind of reconfigure, the hierarchy of needs when it comes to who's most important in society, not putting them up on a pedestal, but understanding the sacrifice that these first responders and their families make, especially in these disasters.
How would you do that any different? I can't fathom that, right? Like you said, you're leaving your family at home in danger to go save strangers.
Yeah.
Is there another way? That is a tough fucking thing to do.
Or you do, hope you align hopefully where you've put them in a safer place with their family or, with friends, which I've had to do. They're further away from the coast or wherever, that particular hazard is. But there's a certain point where you have to go to work, so, and this is what's not acknowledged. So again, my whole kind of reframing is, if we're going to ask them to do that, then we owe it to those responders and their families to put them at home as much as possible as well, when we're not fighting wildfires or hurricanes.
It's a huger, bigger topic, right? It's how do you define success, right? And it's success. I think that, our generation's got easily, and I can easily default to this too, right? It's like, is it worth having the boat or the extra car garage, meaning that you don't make it to your kid's Little League baseball game or practice? That's a conscious decision. I don't think many people are conscious of that, right? They want to grind. They want to work hard. I love that grit, but there's a sacrifice to be made. And I watched this in the college sports realm. And I think some of the younger coaches are maybe learning a little bit, but when I was at Florida, we had 3 head coaches, Steve Spurrier, Ron Zook, and Urban Meyer. I had 3 or 4 D coordinators, 4 different linebacker coaches. And these were all phenomenal, hard working, smart men that dedicated their lives to the profession. And the majority of them did not know their wives and didn't know their kids. Their wives raised the kids. And we watch them on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's like this beautiful, awesome, there's probably nothing more fun in the world to do than be a college football coach. I think I've got the utmost respect for it. But what is success? Is success maybe taking that high school football coaching job and still coaching your kids? I don't know. I think every person has to decide that. And I think that the sooner we can ask those questions, the more happier the people will be. Maybe it is coaching at the highest level, and you can integrate that more. But I don't know. I'm very cautious about when you see people have success at a high level, whether it's sports, entertainment, or whatever, of the cost that's being made for that, the sacrifice, and at least be conscious of it if you're going to make it.
Absolutely. Well, you hear, that so often in our professions, in the first responders, where by the time these men and women get out on the other end, and the work environment is largely the problem when it comes to this. Now they are divorced. So they've worked and chased this carrot for this pension, and maybe now half is going to the ex-wife, and now they're in, a one-bed apartment. They're not seeing their kids. And then we wonder why we have, suicide problems when it comes to our retirees, versus, like you said, and this is on us as well, making choices that prioritize being home with the family, which also includes addressing your own mental health, because there are some firefighters that sign up for all the overtime. And,
Yep.
you got to ask yourself, why? Why do you not want to go home? There's something there that you're not acknowledging. But yeah, advocating so that you're able to do both. A firefighter should be able to serve their community and still be home to parent, to be a loving partner, and, transition into their retirement healthily.
Do you know any stats on that? I'm super curious of like firefighters, first responders, police that get divorced once they retire.
That are divorced or had a divorce.
What percent? Because I mean, I've recently learned that police officers are more likely to die of suicide than they are on the job.
Yeah, as are firefighters. It's more than double the numbers at the moment, and
I'm
that's the
curious.
ones that we know about, because there's
I'm
a lot
curious.
of
Right. I'm curious what the divorce rate is like once they retire. Like you said, they get that pension. Now, I'm making this sacrifice with good intentions for my family, but not being conscious of what, like you said, why am I really not wanting to go home? I think that's where the mindfulness piece of the emotional wellness, that's hopefully the conversation going forward, again, beyond just how much I deadlift or bench press, of what's my emotional, mental health. And I don't know. So I love what you're doing, James.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting perspective. And I've heard a lot of spouses, when the firefighter finally retires, they're sick of them being around the house because they're used to them being gone. So there's definitely a transition there. But I mean, yeah, and most of us, I think a majority have gone through at least a divorce. I mean, I did, and again, the background, I don't think there was really any way around it in that particular situation. I think it would have happened if I was a plumber or, worked in a coffee shop. But yeah, the fact that we're gone, and then now we have this recruitment crisis, so we have mandatory overtime. So now instead of being gone 56 hours a week, you're gone 80 hours a week because you're told you can't go home. Now what is that doing to the family dynamic? Because it's so unfair to the spouse at home who's 24 hours being a single parent. Now you're telling them to do it twice. Well, they've got a life, they've got a career, they've got, they need to have their Sabbath, so
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important whether you're, like you said, a coach
and then
or a
imagine that
firefighter.
again, what we talked about, right? You work those 70, 80-hour weeks, you're super stressed. And then now all of a sudden your kids signed up for on a weekend, 3 hours away, where you're now up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday and Sunday, and there's no rest. And you're seeing these parents burnt out, right?
Yeah.
And they don't get a chance to work on their marriage. So I don't know. This is something I've just been thinking about lately. It's just like, what happened to our Sabbath? When did we think that we were so wise that we didn't need a Sabbath?
I saw a thing on social media a little while ago, and it said in the, I forget now, like 1500s or something, peasants worked 100 and, what do they say, like 180 days a year, because the lords and ladies, or whoever it was, wanted to make sure that they weren't burnt out. And so at the bottom it says, so yeah, you work more than peasants. It is true. If you look at European work weeks, if you look at how we used to work, there was a Sabbath. We did take time off. The days weren't, sunrise to sunset, nonstop work. And we've devolved through the bad side of capitalism to kind of have this, mentality. I'll sleep when I'm dead. You snooze, you lose, all this stuff, rather than realizing that get what needs to be done, and then go see your family and relax and recover.
Well, I don't know about you, but I found too that when my mind is right, so to speak, in the mornings where I do a quick workout, I do my meditation. And so right now we're running a challenge, right? And part of the challenge is you have to do that. You have to work out and meditate before you look at your phone for work emails or social media. James, and people, every challenge, I always ask them, what's the hardest part? And they would thought going into it, it'd be the workouts or the diet. The hardest thing, James, is for them not to look at their phones and check social media or work emails in bed, right? And that just stimulates you for a negative day, right? A stress response. And I think in today's society, it's just so easy to get distracted by all that. So we end up working, let's just say, a longer day when it probably could be cut by 2 hours if we were very efficient and focused on what we were doing. And so I know myself, if I get a good night's sleep, I can get more done in 4 or 5 hours than on a bad night's sleep working 7 or 8 as far as quality work.
Yeah. I had Kirk Parsley on years ago, Navy SEAL turned physician, and he kind of fell into being a sleep expert because he was trying to figure out why his SEALs were so beat down. And he realized it was because they were doing all these night ops and training. And so he shifted it around and became kind of a guru in the sleep world on the tactical side. But he was saying there's that mythology that if you stay up, burn the midnight oil, that you're going to get this work done. He said for every hour of sleep that you lose an hour and a half of productivity. So it just underlines what you said. And if you look at Europe, which is where, trying to really make the case for the fire service, if you look at the progressive corporate space, they're going to a 4-day, 9-hour work week. And they found that they're just as productive, there's more innovation, and they're more efficient, and you've got a happy, healthier workforce. So there we go.
I think for those listening to this, since you're in Florida, a cool story, Florida people love Florida football back there, was the first coach I have is a guy named Steve Spurrier, who's legendary, Florida football field named after him. And then we had Ron Zook coming afterwards. And just to give you a little, something I witnessed was Ron Zook was his blue collar, hard working. You said burn the night, candle at both ends, like up 3, 4 in the morning, never slept, recruited. I mean, he gave his life to the University of Florida. Ultimately, ended up getting fired for going 8-5, which now Florida football would be happy to do. But back then, those standards were not allowed. Like 8-5, you get fired. And then you had Steve Spurrier, who I had when I first there. Coach Spurrier was like a scratch golfer during the offseason. Right? Like he was always trying to make practice shorter so he could go play golf. During some of the biggest weeks in our games, he would take his staff to the beach there in Crescent Beach and go hang out and hang out at the beach with their families. And he is going to go down as one of the greatest coaches ever and coached into his 70s. And you saw my senior year, we had Urban Meyer come in, very much gave everything to the University of Florida, and his body ended up failing him. He left Florida, like mentally broke down. Same thing at Ohio State. He goes to Ohio State, wins national championships. His body breaks down. Coach Spurrier coached, I think, in his 70s. You're not seeing these college football coaches coach in their 70s anymore. Coach Spurrier had a life outside football. And I think that to me, that was just a lesson to learn was just because you're up, there's this idea in football that if I'm up at 4 a.m. and they're up at 4:30, I'm winning. That's not necessarily true.
100%. I agree. I mean, you're giving yourself sleep Sabbath in a way. You're investing in that efficiency and that rest and recovery. You mentioned Crescent. That's where I go. That's my happy place. Yep. To me, it's the most beautiful beach on the planet. I mean, there's more tropical ones. There's something about that beach. I adore it.
I need to get back there. It's I love it here in Santa Barbara. I love the mountains. And like I said, I was trail running this morning and love the waves and being able to go surf and camp. But the simplicity of Crescent Beach is a special place, man. Mm-hmm. I understand your appeal there.
Absolutely.
I wish we wouldn't have said the name of it because I hope more people talk about it.
I think what makes it what it is there's no bars, so it's still to this day. There was a restaurant on the sand that's closed down. They put one on the road instead. That for some reason has closed down. So there's still like nothing around it. So unless you simply just want to go to the beach with no entertainment, everyone else is going to Daytona or wherever. So I think Crescent still retained a lot of its soul, hasn't been corrupted yet.
It's a great place. I love that whole St. Augustine area too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we're talking about college football. You mentioned about injuries. So walk me through that rehabilitation journey that took you to the world of yoga.
Yeah. So I think that, two things come to mind on that, James, was what I didn't realize at the time was, so I would pretty much, earn a starting position, get an injury during the season, play all season hurt. During the off season, I'd get a surgery and we'd get a new linebacker coach. Normally, when you get a starting job, It's yours to lose. At Florida, since I had a new coach every year, he would bring in his new All-American linebackers that he wanted to play. So I had to not just be as good as them, I had to be better than them. And I'd usually miss a lot of spring for a surgery. What I didn't realize at the time was it was actually preparing me for life as an entrepreneur, in the sense that you have these highs and lows, and every season you would have this low of like, I got to have another surgery. And looking back now, I see these entrepreneurs that they'll have a bad quarter or two and they hang up the cleats, right? And it's just, I think it trained me when I wasn't realizing it for life as an entrepreneur years later. That's on like that side, the business side. And the mental fortitude side, I think, was really what it prepared me for, was the mental. But the actual injuries was, I found this yoga teacher in my first time going to yoga. I was just going because there was a hot girl invited me to yoga class. And it was the most boring thing I've ever went to in my entire life. It was like a glorified stretch. I was like, this is a waste of time. But then I got asked to go to this other class where this guy, who a lot of former athletes are going to in Santa Monica, shout out to good old Vinny Marino. And it was the hardest damn thing I've ever done. Like, there were 80 of us in a room, and I was physically looked like I was in better shape than everyone. And I was the weakest person in class because it was so much isometric work, whereas I was used to fast twitch explosive stuff with football. And it humbled me, but it was such an advanced yoga practice. I had no business being in there, but the athlete in me was exactly what I needed, because the gentle stretch wasn't enough to interest me. And the damnedest thing, James, I was like, oh my God, my spine feels like it's 2 inches longer. My hips feel good. My shoulders feel good. My neck feels good. I actually didn't hurt. And so I became addicted to that guy's practice. I would literally train my clients around his schedule. And I trained under him for years and years. And so in the process of doing that, my body started to heal. And I could actually start doing a few other things. And I noticed that when I just did yoga, I became like a little skinny bitch, so to speak. Like, my body felt better, but I didn't have any muscle tone. I was losing cardiovascular fitness. And so I was like, how can I merge what I know as an athlete in a way that doesn't hurt my body? And so I started playing around on a yoga mat, merging athletic training with yoga, and then put that out there in the world. Thought I created the next P90X, only to hear that they love that type of training, but it was too long. You started hearing a lot of people like, hey, get to soccer practice on the weekends. I have to get up at 5 to go to work, et cetera. I don't have time for an hour practice. And so I took the best of that hour practice, which is the class I actually teach in Santa Barbara, and chopped it into 20 minutes. So there's something psychologically, people know that in the mornings they can wake up at 5 a.m. or on their lunch break and know that in 20 minutes they're going to feel better. We finish with a stretch and a brief meditation. And it was basically just trying to help heal myself and then help give my clients other workouts to do when I wasn't training them. And by accident, it led to an online membership. By accident, really.
So walk me through that, because as you said, you were doing this in-person training. The way that we are sold social media, for example, and online is that, if you just follow my program, then you're going to make $1 billion in 3 days. There's this 15-year-old kid. He owns, Venus now.
The most financially successful fitness people are the 15-year-old kids who know how to make good TikTok videos, who don't know shit about training, but they're great at making videos.
Exactly. So walk me through your journey.
Yeah. So it was like, it started as this hour-long program, and I just wanted to share it with the world because it helped me so much. And I thought it was like, basically, and it's what I tell people in class when I teach, is like, it's everything that you would want in one. If you had one class to do, one workout to do for your entire life, it challenges you cardiovascular. There's strength training. There's mobility. There's tapping into the parasympathetic with the nervous system switch over with the meditation, all in one practice. The challenge was bringing it to market. And I had to swallow my pride a little bit and listen to my customers. They kept saying, we love this, but I can only do it once a week. I don't have enough time. Do you have anything that's 20 minutes? Do you have anything that's shorter? I was like, I can't make a 20-minute workout that gets any results. How do you do that? And after 6 or 9 months of me just being too prideful, I started listening to the audience of what they wanted. And then it was my responsibility as a teacher to figure out a way to deliver it in a way that they could consistently go to work and we always say, like, we want you to be able to take care of your body and get to your kids' soccer practice. You shouldn't have to choose between going to your gym and your kids' soccer practice. And so it was just that journey of listening to the customer, understanding that this is what I want to get done. Like, people told me, when I was doing this 12 years ago, starting this content, it was like, don't mix fitness with mindfulness. Those are two different worlds. I was like, I just don't have a desire to create something that's just burpees. I need people to connect to themselves more and have more meaning. And so I was looking back, I was fortunate. I was rigid on that mission of helping people move their bodies and connect to their spiritual practice. But then I was flexible enough to deliver it in a way that was accessible to people, if that makes sense. So we still do what we do. We help people move and connect, but we delivered it in a way that was accessible. And then now you fast forward all these years, the popular word is mental wellness, right? And so now we're able to work in more of the B2B space with these companies and firefighters and police officers because they know they need some digital project on mental wellness. And we just called it getting your mind right for a decade, didn't think about we'd be delivering it to businesses, but that's just kind of how it's naturally evolved.
How did COVID affect you? When it hit, I was already doing 2 a week. I put another one out because I was just sick of seeing the misinformation from both sides. And to me, the middle truth was, let's just make people healthier physically and mentally. And so what I found was my actual downloads got a lot higher because everyone's relying on the virtual form at that time. How did that impact you, and how did you kind of move around that space?
COVID actually ended up being, I would say, a bad thing, and it was surprising. Let me explain this. We saw obviously an initial bump, right? People weren't going to the gym, so we saw our subscriber rate jump up. But we end up losing a lot of organic traffic because what happened was the Pelotons, the Beachbodies, the billion-dollar companies bought up all the eyeball space, right? So like, I don't know, I've got a decent Instagram following, and then none of my followers saw my content anymore. You basically had to pay to play. So like Peloton, which is, in Beach, I think both of them are financially, they created great products. There's great people there, but they're financially really struggling now because they would acquire a customer losing several $100s, right? They would lose $300 or $400 trying to acquire James as a customer, playing the subscriber game, and then go raise more VC funding. So all of us small mom and pops, most of them got put out of business because we lost our organic traffic reach. So it really became going back and focusing on the community and really serving the community. So we didn't see, it actually ended up hurting us for about 2 years, I thought, with COVID. But what it did was it made us a better team and a better program. So, for example, we were able to implement more behavioral techniques in our challenges with gamification, right? Probably would never have done that if I was trying to acquire more customers. It was like, all right, let's go back, regroup. You've got X amount of members here that trust you. Let's serve them better. And by doing that, we've been able to grow the business.
And we literally just reconnected on Instagram. My previous one was shut down. Had like over 200,000.
I just saw that. I was like, did you start over a new one? I couldn't figure out what you were doing. It got shut down?
Shut down. So I think that account is as old as the podcast. So I started it when I did the podcast. So it's 8 years old. Posted up like 9,000 videos over that time, either clips from the podcast that are coming up, or usually kindness and compassion videos. And for some reason, and I don't know, because I support people, so I'm helping the first responders who are trying to be terminated from vaccine mandates, and I'm speaking up again, not personally, but just showing the stories of what's happening in Gaza to these women and these children, middle of the road, humanistic things. But I don't know if that put a bullseye on my back. But out of the blue, I got told I had copyright infringement and didn't get like a slap on the wrist or a week suspension. I got it might be 6 months, because I remember it was a 180-day thing popped up at one point, but it might be permanent. I don't know. We'll find out in April. But that was it. So you've got all these pseudo porn sites, all this violence, all this hate speech on there that's allowed to be. But a guy that shares kindness and compassion and has a free podcast to help first responders, we need to shut that motherfucker down. So so that's where it went.
I'm so sorry that happened. I mean, they didn't shut me down, but I had an interesting similar thing. I haven't watched the episode with Rogan and Zuckerberg, but it sounds like they're at least going to maybe open some of that stuff back up again. During COVID, again, from the police standpoint, like I wanted to just simply share, like for yourself, I wanted the platform to be a place to bring people together and to hear different stories. And this was like during the heights of some of the social unrest and the George Floyd stuff. So a good buddy of mine's African-American trainer. I've lived, dated, almost married an African American girl for people that know me personally. And a buddy of mine had been, again, even it is hurt to hear as a son of a police officer, a brother of a police officer, this African American trainer had been profiled against, and I let him come on and share his story as an African American man, and have just an open conversation. And then the next week, do you know Ryan Tillman? He's got a great Instagram, Breaking Barriers.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I had him on the show.
Really nice African American man. It's weird even describing that, someone like that. But bringing the community together with law enforcement, and I let him share from a police officer standpoint, and a Black police officer, of what's really hurting these African American communities. And dude, that's when all my social stuff got silenced.
Mm-hmm.
When I let an African American cop share about what's really hurting that community, all my stuff got silenced.
Yeah,
it went from, like, let's just say a couple thousand people, like 3,000 or 4,000 people would see our stories if I linked to this. Overnight, it was like 200.
Well, my Facebook to this day, I've supposedly, this is my personal one, which is, used to be friends and family, and now it's obviously people that have connected through the podcast too. I'll post a video on there, and maybe 7 people will see it. Like 7 plays. I'm like, how is, but again, I know how, because you want me to pay to play, but it's my personal Facebook. I'm not selling anything. I don't have a product, I'm just putting out free information. But I've said this many times recently, the common sense, middle of the road voice is the most censored on the internet. Hands down, no question.
Well, just what you said, right? I brought on both sides of and let them share a story, and just let them share their stories, not telling people what to believe. And like you said, like it's much easier in today's world to grow your social media following if one side's evil, right? If the police are evil, or Joe Biden's evil, or Donald Trump's evil, right? Like, it's easier to rally that. Like, for whatever reason, the algorithm likes that hatred more. But the middle of the road, common sense conversation there's nuance to a lot of this stuff. And I don't know. That's one reason I do like podcasts, is you can actually get a feel for someone and have an hour conversation like this and get a better feel for who they are. Whereas the little clickbait stuff is what goes. And that's usually, sadly, I think, not a helpful thing for society as a whole.
No. I mean, I hope it changes. I mean, there's obviously, social media isn't everything, and I don't pay for Instagram, so I can't really complain, and I think it's a great platform. It's an amazing opportunity to share some really positive things. And that's the comments I normally get. But yeah, the fact that they can just say, no, we're not going to talk about Gaza. Don't talk about those babies and those ladies. That's not our agenda. That was very disappointing, because I'm sure that's where it came from. It all of a sudden came out of nowhere right around that time. So
yeah, you pissed off the wrong person.
Yep, good.
Well, it's I think that the beauty of the content of this open, like, if we're going to, 2 things come to mind when I hear this, or a couple things. One, it's our job as business owners to listen to what the platform is and to respond and adjust in a way that still stays true to who we are and the mission that we want to do, but also delivers it in a way that's digestible for what the platform wants. I've yet to figure that out. I was thinking, like, I would teach live yoga videos on Instagram, and to do this in person would be couple $100, right? It's like, I'm going to give this away for free. And then no one sees it, right?
No.
But if I went on there and, talked about vegans are evil and vegan because I eat more meat, that would go viral, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think being true to who we are, but also understanding what the platform is. And then from a business standpoint, I think maybe you and I mentioned this before. Some of the best advice I got was build your email list, because you own that asset. And if we're building our businesses on these other social media platforms, it can all be taken away. So I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I got over the years, was really focus on your email list, because that's one of the few assets you control in this digital world.
I was just told that recently, funny enough, by another former UF football player, John, after my Instagram was shut down. So
former UF football player?
Yeah, I think I want to say it's John Edward, but I don't think that's his last name. That's what he goes by online. But yeah, he was also, I think he was a defensive lineman as well, if I'm not mistaken. But he was there around the Tebow years. So I think is that after you?
Right after Tim was right after me.
Okay, yeah. So I think he was that era. All right. Well, then you mentioned about Jacksonville. Let's talk to
Yeah.
me then about your exposure to training the tactical athlete, and then what are the kind of programming or the videos that they're accessing so that you can keep our first responders healthy.
Yeah, so we make these 20-minute home workout videos that merge athletic training and yoga, right? And it's all digital. You can do it on your desktop, you can do it on your phone, on an app, and then each workout ends in a meditation and prayer. And then so that's like our signature workout. And then we have a whole yoga platform. So what I'm seeing, at least in the first responders world, is you have some people that just this is an answer to the prayers that they don't have time to work out. So they're doing our 20-minute kind of HIIT workouts. They're getting a little bit of mobility training, finally learning about emotional wellness. And then you'll have your people that are like your SWAT team members or your elite firefighters. These people are already kick-ass in shape. They've got a great routine, and they need to use our yoga videos 1 to 2 days a week for mobility training and injury prevention. And so that's kind of how I'm seeing it on the actual platform itself. And then I recently went back and taught at the academy, introduced them to the program, did a conference on mental wellness with them for the new academy members. Going to try to continue to hopefully get in some continuing education for these people. But basically, the city of Jacksonville, the firefighters and police have access to our program for free, provided to them by their insurance trust, which is super grateful to serve those people.
So expand on that, because I mean, this is the barrier to entry for a lot of departments is the financial side. How were they able to get financing through the insurance trust?
Yeah, so when you're self-insured, your goal is to get your insurance costs lower, right? So you give money to that to lower your insurance. And our program it addresses a few issues, right? One, cardiovascular fitness. Two, physical fitness. I just saw where we just got a testimonial from one of the police officers that they have a stress test every year, and they just lowered their stress test time by 2 minutes by doing our program.
Oh, wow.
So it incorporates and they had a knee injury that they couldn't continue lifting weights and training without flaring up the knee injury. So it's super special to hear that someone that was hurt and kind of left forgotten, that person's would have insurance costs would have continued to cause the health insurance trust to go up. So now they're able to help on the physical side. And then again, all these people are trying to throw money into the emotional mental health side, but you typically have some California yoga guru floating on a cloud talking about meditation, and you're not going to relate that to a damn dude in North Florida, I promise you. Right. So I think that one of the things that people gravitate to our program is that we deliver this in a way that's approachable for the average person, that aligns with them and fits in their busy schedule, where you don't have to do some hour-long meditation floating on a cloud by some he, him type she person, right? It's like a dude from North Florida just helping you connect to your spiritual practice and breathe in a way that resonates with you. And we do it right there after your workout. So it's stack. I think one of the things, James, I've learned is that I couldn't get people to work out and meditate separately. So if James Clear has that book, Atomic Habits, right? I didn't realize we were doing this at the time, but if you stack the meditation at the end of your workout, you're able to make it a daily habit. So I think that's kind of how we've been able to present this to the health insurance trust, and then been able to see benefits already, movement, strength, cardiovascular, mobility, and then mental wellness.
It makes a lot of sense. There's a guy I refer to a lot, Tom Hewitt, who's an English surfer, and he lives in South Africa, and he created a nonprofit called Surfers Not Street Children. And long story short, he'll take these kids out that are, orphans. They teach them how to swim, then they teach them how to surf, and some of them even are on the World Surf Tour now, for World Surf League, excuse me. So some of these kids get to a phenomenal ability.
So cool.
But
that's great.
What he would say is that they would do the surfing and swimming first, and then after they would sit down on the beach and they would have a counselor and they would have an informal counseling session. But it was after the exercise. If you hear about some of these, veteran, rucking retreats and that kind of thing, they'll ruck and then they'll sit down and talk. So even in jiu-jitsu that I do, there's times where we'll do, so many rolls, and we might do a couple of calisthenics, and then we'll lie there for 2-3 minutes. And you're absolutely right. There is no better time to actually lean into meditation than when you're already physically tired. So it makes perfect sense.
Right. I love that you guys do that after jiu-jitsu. I think of it, for me, what I think of it as a kid with a temper tantrum. You want to let that kid shake shit out. That's the movement piece. That's the Rutkin. That's the jiu-jitsu. That's one of our TMAC 20 workouts. Once you get all that energy out of the body, hey, let's take a couple of deep breaths. Let's go through this mind right meditation again. Moment of gratitude. 1, 2, lifting up a loved one. 2, 3, visualizing success. 4, being present, being still. And then when I find that once you do 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, it kind of gets you out of the monkey mind, and then you can drop in, and that's when the magic happens. So the movement again is like that, kind of shaking things up to get all the energy out, and then dropping in.
Absolutely. Well, we talked about the younger athletes earlier. I'd love to talk about the aging athlete, so, as we mentioned before we hit record, I'm 50 now.
Yep.
The cop with the knee injury, when I think about that and I think about knees over toes and foundation training,
yep.
A surgeon is going to look at the knee, someone maybe with a little bit more open lens is going to go, well, let's talk about your glutes and your hamstrings and your calves and your the tibialis, I think it is, the front muscle. Is that balance there? Is that causing the knee injury? So on my own personal journey, I found myself going away from that kind of 1 rep max, red line mentality, still doing a red line, workout once in a while, but now working on accessory work, mobility, because I should be as fit and strong as I need to be at 50 years old. To me, it's what is working against my physicality. And if I can unlock that, I will then be fitter and stronger and more efficient. Right. So what is the shift in your coaching philosophy with the kind of middle-aged and beyond athlete?
So I think that, every day we have a daily workout calendar that people can follow or they can implement with their own program, right? Like, back up real quick. If you're the fit SWAT guy listening to this, you just go do our yoga videos for the main part and you've got your normal routine. But for the typical people, we structure it where it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, what we call total body hit. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, what we call cardio flush. And then Sunday is that Sabbath, so to speak, or a yoga option. The trick with hit training, and this is where the difference between men and women a little bit, is that hit training for the most, I found that from 7 minutes to 25 minutes is the sweet spot. Once you get, I've trained a couple people in the Olympics. I could push to around 32 minutes, but again, these are Olympians. Once you start getting north of that 30-minute mark in that anaerobic capacity of 80, 90% heart rate max, you can start releasing hormones in the body that does damage. And so our 20-minute workout, right, you may have a 6 to 7 minute yoga warm-up, and you're really only doing a hit training for 14 minutes, 13 minutes or so. And so we have that a couple days a week. And then I always tell people, listen to your body. For example, I've had a couple knee surgeries on this right knee. It's flaring up right now. I may now just need right now 2 weeks of what I call getting after it hit training, right? And the rest is yoga. If it's feeling really good, after a couple of weeks of that, maybe I'll go to 3 days a week of the short hit training, right? There may be a time where everything flares up and I just do yoga for a month. So I think learning to listen to your body is key. I think that where you're at right now, James, may be different 5 years from now. Same thing with me. I think learning to listen to your body. And like you said, I was like, all right, my knee's hurting right now. Plyometrics probably don't make a lot of sense, but I can do yoga, right? And I think the key is shifting your thought process from not what you can't do, but what you can do. And I think that's a key thing with injuries, is shifting that mindset. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it, is like, listen to the body. We've got joint friendly stuff with yoga. If you want to burn as many calories as possible, get in the anaerobic zone, do our hit training stuff. And the sweet spot, again, is just that, because there's some negativity now with hit training of actually messing up with hormones, is that we keep it short and sweet. I think that's the key with it. And we have a nice, warm up. So you're not just going, a lot of the videos you'll see on YouTube, you'll go a hit workout, you go straight into burpees, right? But you take a guy that's 50 years old, he's got a little spinal stenosis of his low back, 5 a.m., you start doing burpees, he's going to hurt his back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was the man who I believe was a Japanese man that came up with Tabata.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. That's just 4-minute workout on its own.
Usually it's 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off.
Yeah. So there's 8 rounds, and that's just 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and he proved that in 4 minutes you could have, I forget what the percentage was, but a pretty, impressive, impact on your cardiovascular system. So then, when you start looking at the long drawn out CrossFit workouts, for example, of which I've done many, there is a kind of law of diminishing returns. At a certain point, your form is terrible, you're exhausted, and are you really actually gleaning the benefits, or are you just learning mental and physical resilience and that's it, the suck?
I always say do what feels great. Like if you're doing CrossFit and you feel great, keep doing it. I have a bad back. Like I have a fracture in my L5S1. Cleaning, snatching does not feel good. It flares it up. I did a trail run today, and it was 9 minutes and 13 seconds. That was it. I climbed up a hill for 9 minutes and 13 seconds. I did some yoga before and afterwards, did a little breath work and meditation, and that's it. And that's one of my, right now I'm doing 2 get after it days. It'll be like that on Friday and something like that on Monday where I'm getting the heart rate up. But again, it's no more than 25 minutes. And then the rest of my routine is yoga. And I think that which ties in now is if you're doing HIIT training for too long, and again, I do whatever type of movement you love, right? If it's Orange Theory Fitness, if it's F45, it's jiu-jitsu. I think everyone should do jiu-jitsu, by the way. But do what you love. I always say start there, but you need to make sure your diet complements that. And so one of the issues that I saw over the years as a trainer is you'd have all these people do these hard hour-long cardio classes, and they kept gaining weight or couldn't lose weight. And what happens was their body and their hormones were such a wreck that they ended up over-consuming carbohydrates and sugars afterwards, which then spikes your insulin levels, and they couldn't lose the weight. But if I could keep them to do a short, quick workout, we could then have them eat a high protein with a little bit of moderate fat in their diet, let's just say a couple of eggs with some ground beef, and their insulin levels stayed stable, and they would drop the weight like that by working out less and then having them move throughout the day by walking. So we have a concept we teach in our program called the 320. So we make these 20-minute workouts. We always say, own your morning, own your day, knock out your 20-minute workout first thing. Go for a 20-minute walk with your colleague at lunch. Before or after dinner when you get home, take the pet for a walk, go for a walk with your spouse. So it keeps you in a fat-burning state. And by doing that, you're able to complement that with more of a higher protein diet, roughly around 30 to 50 grams of protein, depending on how big you are for all 3 meals. You do that and you'll get pretty freaking lean, and you can fit that into your busy schedule.
What is your perspective on how much you should eat? And the reason I say that is, for the longest time, I grew up with the bodybuilders, and all that stuff. And then here we are in 2025 with all types of diets that have kind of come and gone, as it were.
Yeah.
But observing myself, I seem to be just fine eating a lot less than a strength and conditioning nutritional plan would tell me I should eat for the amount of, exercise that I do. So I can't help but feel, of course, if you are trying to gain weight, if you are, training multiple hours a day, you're an MMA fighter, you're a football player, there's an entire different nutritional program for you. But I can't help but feel like, especially men, we're almost being told to eat too much rather than understanding, and this is just my kind of the way I look at life, evolutionary, that fundamentally humans didn't have access to all this food all the time,
right,
and that the human body actually can do a lot more with a lot less than we think.
Yep. So as an athlete at Florida, I was on a 6,000 calorie a day diet, right? But my life was training. I needed that at the time, right? I have no idea how many calories I eat now. None. I don't really count the macros. I'll, again, try to aim for around 50 grams of protein, which is easily someone can put in the chat GBT and like, I'm eating 2 burgers, how many grams of protein, and get a good feel for that. Chat GBT is a simple, easy tool. But I'm not a huge calorie counter. So much of what I think is intuitive, right? So you may feel, James, on eating 1 burger at lunch and you feel phenomenal. For me, I feel great with 2, right? No, I don't usually use the bread with it, but like 2 burgers. I say listening to your body and eat till you're satisfied, not till you're stuffed, right? And I think that people need to understand that certain people's bodies break down things more efficiently than others, right? And it's just being a master and a student of your own body, of what feels good, right? As far as diet-wise. So I think we do overconsume. And I think most people overconsume, though, James, is because they're eating non-nutrient dense food. They're eating a lot of calories, right? So the breakfast, my typical breakfast will be 4 eggs with some ancestral blend meat, which is ground beef, heart, and liver mixed in that. I eat that. I'm full till lunch. Lunch, I'll eat, say, 2 hamburger patties with some sauerkraut. And guess what? I'm full till dinner. So I'm not snacking. Dinner may be a steak and a potato. And I'm full. Like I have no idea how many calories it is. You can easily calculate it, but it's like, that's what feels good in my body. And I think that most people are snacking all day for 2 reasons. One, They're doing too long of cardio, which again, their glycogen levels are depleted and they need more sugar and carbohydrates. So they're on this sugar roller coaster train all day long. And then the second part is they're not eating nutrient dense food. There is a huge movement years ago on how great kale was. And I'm not against kale. I think vegetables are great for you. Some people do better on vegetables, some people do better on meat. But you take a piece of organ meat and look at the nutritional profile of a piece of organ meat that I put in those eggs, right? That ancestral blend, first piece of kale, it's not even close. And I think most people aren't getting good nutrient dense food. They're just eating a lot of calories.
Well, they say, don't they, that a lot of the carnivorous predators, when they attack some sort of prey, they're not taking the loin, they're eating the organs first.
They always, you watch any wild animal, they'll let the alpha eat first, and the alpha always goes for the organ meat.
Yeah, it's funny because that was poor person's food in the UK, and that's but that's a lot of our steak and kidney pie and some of the breakfast meats and stuff. But I grew up on liver and kidney,
I mean, take this from a guy who grew up on Pop-Tarts and Mountain Dew for breakfast. So it's been a hell of a journey, I promise you.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, with that being said, so you touched on some people do better on meat, and I think that's a really important point. We have Aboriginals living in the outback in Australia, then we have Inuits eating, whale blubber up in the Alaskan area. Clearly, there are different humans that have relied on different kind of nutritional resources for a long, long time. But there's an absolutism when it comes to the nutrition conversation. I've heard, people spend hours and hours on podcasts explaining why vegans are idiots or vice versa. And to me, the first common denominator is if you remove processed shit from your diet, you're probably going to do pretty well, whether it's carnivore or vegan. But what is your philosophy on someone finding what works for them rather than shoving a specific nutritional kind of philosophy down their throat?
So people like you and I could go these deep dives into the very niches of it, right? But for 90% of Americans, at least, our philosophy, and we teach them in our program, is if you can plant it, pick it, or catch it, it's probably pretty good for you. If man-made, stay away. If we do those things right there, you're taking care of almost all of the obesity crisis we have in America. A lot of the type 2 diabetes. If you're just eating real whole food, like people want to have this magic bar or this, just eat real whole food. Now, I think from a individual standpoint, I think some people will thrive more on meat and some people will thrive a little bit more on plants. And I think for me, I'm not married to any of it like a religion. I'm going to do what feels good. So I'll run all these little mini experiments. I'll do a time where I'll eat mainly vegetables and see how I feel. I'll do a time where I'll do strict carnivore for 30 days and see how I feel. By running little experiments, I have went from the thought process of 3/4 of my plates being vegetables with a small amount of meat to now 3/4 of my plate being meat with a small amount of vegetables or a potato for dinner, right? My body, I just got lab work back, runs really well on high quality red meat. Doesn't raise my cholesterol, any of those concerns. I do really well. Some people, it may raise their cholesterol a little bit. I think that's a much more nuanced conversation than good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. But that being said, I think there's an individual part where we all have to be students of our own body and not being married to a certain type of diet and understanding that, hey, I'm 42, you said you're 50. 10 years from now, James, our bodies may change and we may want something a little different and not being married to that and seeing how our body feels.
Absolutely. I think it was Jeff Nichols, who's a former SEAL Team 6 turned strength and conditioning guru in a tactical space. He was saying as well that, as your body heals, if you've been eating a lot of processed food and you have intolerances, like as your body progresses and gets healthier, you can then start factoring some of these foods back into your diet, the healthy ones. So you're constantly evolving.
I think that what he's probably tapping into, right, is healing your gut. And I think that if we can heal our guts, like with some sort of elimination diet, so a basic level elimination would be like Whole30, right, which removes a lot of the inflammatory type products. I think a more aggressive form of that is carnivore, right? Going carnivore for 30 days. And I think you can help heal your gut. And depending how much damage is done to your gut will be when you can reintroduce these other foods back in. But I say run little experiments. Don't take my word for it. Don't take James's word for it. Try this, see how you feel, and keep what you like, get rid of what you don't. But I look at it like basically right now, and again, this could change in 10 years from now. nutrition in like basically three categories. I look at maintenance, right? Maintenance from my clients, so everything will be still a lot of high protein, right? Still 30 to 50 grams, mixed in with some overnight oats occasionally, those type of things, some vegetables. I look at getting what I call a shred diet, which is where we remove the overnight oats and it's just mainly protein and eggs for a short period of time. And then I look at an anti-inflammatory or autoimmune. The most effective thing I've seen for autoimmune is carnivore. So I kind of put it in those three categories of like maintenance, get shred. Most people come to us to lose weight. I'm going to meet them where they are. And then I look at it from an autoimmune standpoint of how I'm working with people, if that makes any sense.
No, that does. I'm glad we asked those questions though, because I think the nutrition side, when you just break it down to principles rather than what you should and shouldn't eat, that's
Correct.
really, I think, is where most people glean, are able to apply it to their own lives. All right. Well, I want to go to some closing questions before I let you go. The first one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Interesting. I have to think about it. I would say I always say the most impactful book I've ever read is simply still the Bible. I'm not someone that preaches religion or anything like that. I cuss like a sailor, but I've read almost every self-help book there is, and I still come back to the Bible and I'm blown away at the wisdom. You don't have to be a Christian necessarily to pick this up, but if you pick up the book and you read the book of Proverbs and you listen to King Solomon, there is so much wisdom on things you and I talked about, identity, right? Like chasing the accolades of life didn't bring him happiness. Chasing women didn't bring him happiness. Chasing wealth didn't bring him happiness. There's so much read in there. Then reading the Gospels, to love how Jesus loved his neighbor, right? Like if I'm a meat eater, I got to love my vegan brothers and sisters. If I'm a conservative, I need to love my Democrat brothers and sisters. I think that the Bible is such a beautiful book. I think some other great books out there, 7 Habits by Stephen Covey, I think it's a classic, kind of a dense read, but I think anyone on nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price, I think it's kind of what you tapped into. He studied the Aborigines. He studied from people living in Central America and, looked at all their different diets and their health. And the conclusion he came back to was they moved every day and they ate fresh local. If you were in Arctic climates, you had more animal fat. If you were in the equator, you have more fruits and vegetables. I think those are 2 good books. I'm reading a great one now by this person that's a Buddhist teacher. I can't think of the name of it. Wish I knew the name of it. This interesting thing in teaching in Buddhism that I'm learning now. A lot of Zen in that. But yeah, I think the same thing about, I'm not really married to one type of traditional thought. I'm open to learn from whoever's out there.
When you talked about the Proverbs and the kindness, this is one thing that I struggle with, and this isn't aimed at just Christianity. It's aimed at, faith-based in general. As we listen to the rhetoric and we see the divisive narrative and, like you said, that kind of hateful clickbait that seems so popular from a country that predominantly is faith-based, why is there a disconnect between the wisdom in these holy books and what these prophets are actually doing and that being applied? Because, when you hear about homelessness, people just want them shooed to another city. The addicts, well, it's just a waste of Narcan. Why don't we just, let them die and then they'll be gone? Some very non-Jesus like things being, discussed or, by people of all religions, but obviously we are a very, very heavily Christian nation. So where is that disconnect between the kindness and compassion that Jesus taught and where some people are in 2025, even though they may visit these holy buildings on the holy day?
Yeah, so I would say, one, I'm a flawed person. And I'd say my faith has evolved over the years. Some people in the Christian world would say I'm not Christian. I connect to God through Jesus. That's how I connect. But I would say, one, I'm flawed. 2, the majority of people that say they're Christian have never read the Bible. They go to church on a Sunday and some guy who interprets the Bible for them tells them how to live their life, right? And there's no application. Like, I'm a Christian, so to speak. Right now, I'm not even going to church. I take my Sabbath off. I'll read, maybe it's the Bible on Sunday, maybe it's something with Buddhism. Like, that's kind of my faith right now. Like, I move and connect to God. I connect through Jesus, but that's my faith. As a society as a whole, I think that, one, So my journey to find, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I said, like, my dad had some demons he was fighting. I followed a girl I had a crush on in middle school, and some sort of event that the church put on. I had no idea. Fell in love with Jesus Christ. Felt like a true connection to God, my Creator. Picked up the Bible, read it cover to cover at 12 years old. Like, I would have aunts, uncles, whoever take me to church, drop me off, pick me up. As I've gotten older again, experienced more cultures, different people from different walks of life, my view of humanity and the awesomeness of our Creator is much larger. To put something, I go out there every Wednesday and paddle out on a surfboard, spin the board around and look at the vast Pacific Ocean. The idea of trying to put the Creator of that in a box, it fits my little pea brain. It's the most humbling thing ever. So I don't think I have the answers, but I would say people that claim to know, if we're speaking of Christianity as a whole, say they're a Christian and they go on Sunday, but they don't live like it in business on Monday, right? Like, that's just a disconnect. I think truly, when you know the love of Jesus, you should take that with you on Monday just as much as you are on Sunday. And so that for me is something that I really don't give two shits what someone says they believe. Show me how you treat others. And I think the last couple of years in our society really showed me of, like, in my friend group, like, who actually I think knows God and who doesn't. Because again, I don't think God just called, I lean more middle right, just how I lean. But if I can't love my people on the left, I don't think I know Jesus, at least in my understanding of the teachings of Jesus. Doesn't mean I have to go with what necessarily their thoughts or beliefs are, but I felt that God has called me to love my brothers and sisters. And so for me, that is what I would say, how I view society as a whole. But the thing I would say, James, is whether you find this through Christianity, you find this through Buddhism, you find this through whatever type of spiritual teachings, I know me personally that when I don't put something above myself, I will feel that void. I think humanity is created to know our Creator. I think there's something inside us on a spiritual level that knows there's more to it than this earth. And when I don't put something above me that's more divine, I will fill that with sex. I'll fill that with alcohol. You can fill that with drugs. I'll fill that with status. And I think that I mentioned the Bible earlier and going back to King Solomon, those were instrumental pieces of my childhood that at least when I fall off course, which I do all the time, it brings me back to that North Star. And I would say society as a whole, we need that North Star. However you get there, completely up to you. But I would say as a society in America, we need that North Star. I look at a lot of people jumping on board on the ultra MAGA train. I'm excited about what the president's going to do. I'm excited about, I hope, but my thing was, if Kamala would have won, I would hope she was the best president ever, right? I think that sometimes we jump on bandwagons and we forget the morality of what we say we actually believe, just to be a part of the in group. And so I think that's something as a country we have to be mindful of, is knowing what our North Star is and continuing every day to humble ourselves and work towards that.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, even with the presidential, nastiness that was going on, just like COVID, let's make people healthier. To me, this last 8 years, the question should be 340 million people. How do we keep ending up with these people to choose from? That's the real truth in all this. No one was excited about any of these people as the country's greatest leader that will bring us all together and raise this country back up again. So when you're arguing over people that really you're not, in your heart of heart, you're not that excited about, then why don't we have the different conversation of bringing America together? And so then you have two candidates, and you might like candidate A a little bit more than B, and I like B more than A. But whoever wins, we're both like, well, it's still a win. They're both awesome. I just like them a little bit more because they like this issue or whatever. Yeah. That's what it should happen every election season, is that we should have two great people so we're not disappointed when the other one wins, and then hopefully in 4 years, my candidate will win. That's where we need to get to, come together and question the system rather than being drawn apart by a broken system.
I would love for us to get there, but you're mentioning good books. Have you read Why Good People Argue Over Politics and Religion?
I have not.
Fantastic. It was written by Professor out of Virginia. And it really helped me at least understand some of this. Because again, I grew up where I'm from, it's 99% Republican. I've lived in LA that was 90 something percent Democrat, and I would go home. It was almost like two different countries, right? I hop on a plane, I'm in two different countries. And the majority of these people had so much in common. Sure, they had different ways that they would say organize a society, but the majority of them were great people. There were some assholes that grew up in my small little town, but the majority of them, fantastic, give you the shirt off their back. I met some of the most kindest people in liberal ass LA, right? And there's a lot of assholes in LA too, right? But the people in California would go home and watch CNN and they would see the worst of society in the South. And then my family in the South would put on Fox News all day and see the worst of society in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could bring people together, like I brought my family out once and they definitely did not fit in California. My dad about went to jail. A couple of cops got called on him, but that's a different story. And my dad barbecued and we had people from all walks of life and they laughed. They still to this day talk about, hey, how's your dad doing? Or how was this person? My parents ask about Alex and these people. They got along great, but they'll go home and watch their news networks and hate each other. But they sit down and broke a meal and laughed together. And I think we need more of that. And I think that's one thing that yoga and our mind right practice of getting my mind right, so to speak, every day, it helps me disconnect from the emotional pull of where I want to naturally lean, right? And what we say, like meditation lengthens the gap between stimulus and response, right? So James has got this position. I've got this position. Well, fuck you, James, right? That's my natural instinct. That's so supernatural for me. Take a deep breath, come back to it. I see James as a good dude. James cares about this issue. All right, let me learn from James' perspective and actually truly listen to him and not just try to respond and prove him wrong. Can I truly listen to James? I think that's where yoga has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why you saw such division during COVID, because such fear was created. And I remember people pointing out that you can't critically think when you're in a sympathetic state, when you're in a fight or flight state. And this is what we saw. Rather than being calmed and brought together, it was the perfect environment to divide. And obviously COVID and the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, all that division, was right there. And then in the tail end of that was the election season again. So, when I 100% agree, if you can actually do the work and calm your own mind, you're going to be able to mentally take a step back and go, wait a second, both of you are kind of crazy. I think we're going to stand here in the middle where the normal people are. And, the more of us to do that, as you said, with commonalities, no matter what color, creed, sexual orientation, you want a roof over your family's head. You want food in their stomachs. You want them to be safe. You want them to be happy. That's a universal feeling. All the other stuff is fluff. And a lot of the differences then you can celebrate. I'm Christian, you're Buddhist. Oh, cool. Tell me about, some of your philosophies. Wow, that matches the Bible over here and here. So, I mean, finding, that coming together is so important. But I agree, an underslept, overstressed mind literally loses the ability to think that way. So that's why meditation and sleep are so important.
And we're all guilty of it, right? I would say that, there's a dogma about Christianity that's so rigid. But look, I did my yoga teacher training in LA, and you have to read the Yoga Sutras by Patyana, how to pronounce his name. And it was pretty much Proverbs. And I brought this up to the yoga teacher, and they were like, don't you bring Christianity in here. This is wrong. This is wrong. I'm just showing you parallels of like this book that you hold sacred, this book over here that they hold sacred, and showing you the similarities. I'm not telling you what to believe. And I saw it just as judgmental in the yoga world as I saw it in the Christian world. So I think that we're all tribal beings by default. That's why I go back to, we need to have this North Star that makes us less selfish and point to something that's divine.
100%. Well, that was books. What about films and documentaries that you love?
I just finished the Aaron Rodgers documentary. That was pretty good.
I saw that
on
too.
Netflix?
Excellent.
Yeah, he one of the points you brought up earlier, he was saying that I just won the Super Bowl and I'm on this bus at 1 a.m. There's got to be more to life than this.
Yeah.
Right. I think that search for identity, I thought that was pretty good. I just watched, finished a good one on Netflix. Gosh, he's such a great actor. And it was a reason I bring it up was because it was about, I think, took place in the UK in the 1800s. Gosh, he's a jiu-jitsu guy and he's an actor. He was in Peaky Blinders too. Tom Hardy. Is that his name?
Tom Hardy. Yes, thank you. Yeah, because he does jiu-jitsu. He's the ambassador for Reorg. So yeah,
great actor. He was in a document, or not a documentary, but a TV show on Netflix I just watched. It was pretty good. He's such a great actor. That was one of your UK films.
Yeah, he was actually in the Bike Riders? Is that what it was called? That was a good one. That just came out. I think it's free on Amazon. I think it is.
Okay.
But it was him, Austin Butler, who's the guy that played Elvis in the movie recently. Really good film as well.
Hold up, I'm just texting a client. I'm gotta call him. Some running a little late for
no
them.
worries.
Went a little longer than I thought. We're good. All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
No way. We'll be 5 minutes. We'll be done. All right. What's the next one? Okay. Well, speaking of great people, is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Let me think on that. But someone who just came to mind who's local, and I don't know Carly that well, but Carly is a firefighter here in Santa Barbara and is maybe one of the best athletes I've ever seen. We typically think of firefighters, women not being qualified physically to be a firefighter. I think that's by default. Men are typically bigger, stronger, faster. Carly will humble you, James.
There's lots of female firefighters and athletes that have humbled me.
Carly, I again don't know Carly that well. Just we've run in some similar circles in the athletic world. She competes in all these extreme games, but I think Carly's like 6'3", 180 pounds or 200 pounds of just pure athlete. She's a local firefighter. There's a guy in our community that does our workouts. He's a firefighter down in LA. That could be a good one to talk to about what all they're seeing right now. Those are two people in the firefighter community that come to mind.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I'll have to work on connecting with them. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to make those connections.
Brilliant. All right, well, then the very last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you and all the programming, what do you do to decompress?
So I think for me, it's building systems, right? And routines. And so that's, again, every morning, I say about 99% of the mornings of the year is I move my body and do my mind right meditation first thing. That helps me start the day. Look at the day through a better lens. If I don't, then I'm cranky. I'm irritable. I'm a son of a bitch if I don't. I'm trying to get better at every day doing that soulful, what I call that soul check-in. Not as great with that yet, but I notice that helps a lot to decompress towards the end of the day. Just a couple of deep breaths, listen to some music, and then I'll ask myself, what do I need? And then what do I need to let go of? That's been helpful. And then lately, really trying to make an emphasis on getting to bed with no screens an hour before bed, or at least 45 minutes. And then stretching, mobility. I've got some red light in the house or some dim lights, one of those, no social media, no TV, and just kind of stretching, meditating. And then I'll do some prayer. I'll, talk to God as I'm laying on my back and just kind of decompressing for the day.
Brilliant. Well, for people listening, where are the best places to find you and the programming online? And then what about social media?
Yeah, so just go to TMAC Fitness, TMAC Fitness. It's one of the nicknames I got there playing football at Florida. So I had to figure out a name to put on the good old LLC. So TMACfitness.com, you can get some free workouts, check out our programming. And then I'm on Instagram at TMAC Fitness as well.
Beautiful. Well, Todd, I want to say thank you so much. I want to be mindful of your time. I know you need to go coach now, but it's been such an incredible conversation. I love these organic chats because they do go all over the place, and we've gone everywhere from generational trauma through to nutritional and religious philosophies. So it's been amazing. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
James, thanks for being a great guest and just letting the conversation flow. I really enjoyed this, man. Like you said, we covered a lot of areas with not really any agenda and just had an open, honest, truthful conversation. And hopefully it helps some people at home, gives them something to think about.